All right, my next guest has built a distinguished record of public service as the executive director of Headwaters Park, as the former president of the Board of Trustees of Fort Wayne Community Schools, and as the current councilman for the 5th District of the City of Fort Wayne. Jeff Paddock knows a thing or two about outstanding public servants, and he's channeled that into writing a new book, Indiana Political Trailblazers, The Women Who Changed Indiana History. Jeff, welcome to the 260.
Thanks, Ed. It's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Sir, what happened? What inspired you to write a book about women public service?
Well, you mentioned several things about that introduction, and I appreciate every word you put in. I have been around for a while. I've known a lot of folks, and I've worked for a few of them. And I didn't see anyone had really recorded, I think, the history of some of the real trailblazers that are women, that are female. And they may have been married to individuals that had careers. Some of them were, but they struck out on their own and shattered some glass ceilings on their own, and I think helped pave the way for a lot of women to get involved in politics. And so I wanted to tell their story, and many of them were firsts in their fields.
Yeah. So tell me about some who made the book.
Yeah. So 15 individuals, and I tried to be bipartisan as I normally am. 8 Democrats and 7 Republicans. Sarah Evans Barker, and we do this in alphabetical order, is a Republican, the first woman to be appointed a federal judge by President Ronald Reagan in 1984. Other firsts are Virginia Dill McCarty, a Democrat who was the first woman to be appointed a U.S. attorney in Indiana by President Jimmy Carter way back in 1977. Jill Long Thompson, the first woman, a Democrat, to be nominated for, governor, and then later U.S. Senator first, and then later governor, and then later served in Congress.
You worked with her, right?
Yeah, I did. I was district director for her for 2 years when she served in what was then the 4th Congressional District in Northeast Indiana. Becky Skillman, a Republican, the first woman to be elected lieutenant governor. You have others like Julia Carson, the first African-American woman to be elected to the State House of Representatives, and one of 2 to be elected to the State Senate, and then served in Congress. And there are many more.
I'm sure there's others. You make a big point about being bipartisan. Is that a kind of a nod to the age we're in?
I think it is, Ed. And I think a lot of folks are getting very discouraged by what's happening in Washington, and to some extent even what's happening in Indianapolis, in our state capital, that we saw in this last session. And they're aching to see bipartisanship come back to public service. And so I think on the local level, we try to do that here in the city of Fort Wayne. But I wanted to write about people who were in very influential positions, some in Washington, some in Indianapolis, some were mayors, prosecutors, like I say, U.S. attorneys, judges, and so on, balance that.
As you did the research for the book, which story surprised you most? Like, which really stood out to you?
I think the one that I would have to say, of course, Pam Carter, first African-American and first woman to be elected a state attorney general. I mean, what an enormous accomplishment that was in 1992 when she was elected. Virginia McCarty is kind of the trailblazer I look back at. She was born 100 years ago now, and came very close, within 2 percentage points, I think, of being elected to the state attorney general's position. She ran for several offices and came very, very close. But she opened up, I think, doors for a lot of others and helped lead the efforts to make it more acceptable to vote for women in public office.
Sure, that leads me to my question of all of them, which do you think had the most impact? I know that's a very tough thing to gauge, but could that have been the most impactful? Would she have been the most impactful?
I think there are several of them probably in that category. Sarah Evans Barker, as I mentioned, a federal judge, Virginia McCarty, followed by Susan Brooks, who were state attorneys. You had Vi Simpson, who was the Senate Minority Leader and the first individual to become a minority leader of one of those 2 bodies in the state legislature. And they all had, I think, one thing in common too, Ed, is that while they were partisan Republicans or Democrats in their own right and very active in politics, when they got elected, they worked across the party line.
Sure.
This was the day when you didn't have super majorities in either House or the Senate.
Right.
And you had to work across the line to get things done.
There was a spirit of compromise.
And there was much more, not only bipartisanship, but I think moderation in the Democratic and the Republican Party that I think a lot of folks are calling out for again. So I wanted to single these out. You mentioned why those individuals. There were some others that I had in mind that we had kind of draw the line on to get this out. Part of the reason was I wanted to publish this in the election year of 2026. This just came out in May after the primary, and hope to be able to promote it in the next few months before the November election.
Do you think that the women trailblazers of today, the present, are facing similar, the same, different issues than the women that you researched for the book?
I think that we need to see individuals from both parties advance that are more moderate, and sometimes I don't see this happening, particularly with the Republican Party. But I think if we could find a way to see more moderation in our parties, I think we would see more individuals that want to come forward and serve. And you know, it takes a lot to run for political office now. We're told that in the state of Texas, they may spend up to $300 million in this Senate race. So finances are a very difficult situation too. I think that's helped draw folks away from politics, which is unfortunate. But again, I hope that those individuals that would see a path forward for more moderation and working together on both sides to get things done, and that can happen again in Indiana. And I think that
Do you
can
think
happen
that's
again.
the lesson that we can learn from these trailblazers that can be applied to maybe even local politics in Fort Wayne?
I think so because, you know, I think we do things a little bit differently here in Fort Wayne. We are pretty much a mixed, you know, the Mayor Sharon Tucker is a Democrat. We have 6 Republicans and 3 Democrats on the city council, but we all work together pretty well. That doesn't mean we don't have disagreements, but we work together. I think that's a model we could share. And again, I think if we can see some more moderates come forward, the American people, the people in Indiana, people in Fort Wayne, I think are aching to vote for individuals that want to roll up their sleeves and work hard, but do things on a consensus basis and try to bring bipartisanship back to government.
All right, we'll end it on that great note. The book is titled Indiana Political Trailblazers, The Women Who Changed Indiana History by Jeff Paddock. Check it out. Thank you, Jeff. Let's do this again.
Thank you, Ed. My pleasure.